Coffee with Bob. Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down with Mark Haynes. Mark is with Abide, which is an environmental specialist company. So Mark, why don't we get right off into it here? We're both from Southwick now, correct? Yep. Let's go and talk a little bit about how you got into the business in the environmental specialty area, and also a little bit about who you are, where you came from, and how'd you get here to Western Massachusetts?
All right. So I grew up in Vermont.
Nice.
Went to Springfield College.
Okay.
I was an environmental science major, played soccer there, and stayed in the area.
Yeah.
So started off in the consulting arena.
Okay.
Worked for about 20 years in that arena, and then went to kind of the contracting side of things.
Okay.
And have been there ever since.
Yeah. So, I mean, our kids have grown up with each other out in Southwick. That's how I know you. But I also know you as a professional in this arena. Let me tell you something. It's very highly specialized, and you do a wonderful job, and especially educating our sales associates. So let's get right into it. Tell us a little bit about what Abide does, kind of on a bigger picture, and then
Sure.
we'll get into the more specific into one area today.
Yeah. So Abide's an environmental contractor specializing in asbestos, lead, mold, and other environmental remediation.
Okay.
Does a lot of work with property transfers, residential property, commercial, and industrial and so forth. But is involved with a lot of real estate transactions, because when environmental issues are encountered, then someone has to deal with them.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the real estate business, we all deal with several things: lead, paint. We deal with the asbestos issues. We also deal with brownfields and different things like that.
Yep.
But let's talk about the asbestos today in
Sure.
this segment. So,
Yeah. So asbestos, there were over 3,600 different types of building materials that actually contained asbestos.
Wow.
So it's not something that you can readily identify, although there are the key, building components or building materials that people usually say, yes, that's a high degree of probability there's asbestos there,
Okay.
right? And that would be, pipe insulation, the corrugated cardboard, the mud fittings, pre-1980s, even though that's not an exact cutoff date. Resilient flooring, especially like 9x9 floor tiles.
Okay.
But, it goes into plasters and sheetrock compound and caulkings and adhesives and roofing materials and so
Wow.
forth and so on. And this is where people get, very concerned,
Okay.
right? So because they say, asbestos is cancer causing,
Yeah.
and it does create asbestosis and other cancer causing diseases, it is highly regulated.
Yeah.
All right. But what I tell people usually is, every time you buy a property, you don't have to go in and determine what everything is, but it really depends on what your end game is.
Okay.
So if you're going to buy a house and you're going to completely rehab it, you're going to knock out all the walls, take out all the windows and so forth, well then, yeah, it's in your best interest to have testing done to see if there's asbestos, because you don't want to disturb it improperly and create a worse hazard. All right. However, if you're moving into a house, and it might be an older home, but you're not planning to do anything, and the heating system's been turned over and and upgraded and things like that, it may not be a big concern.
Okay.
Asbestos was allowed in schools for years,
Yeah.
right? It just had to be managed in place.
Okay.
All right. And so that's usually how I kind of, address homeowners or potential homeowners.
Okay. So Abide goes out and they look for things like that, and they
So Abide is able to collect a few samples.
Okay.
They're not going to do a full assessment of a commercial building, right? There's consultants that do that and have much more experience with that. But if you have a concern about old pipe insulation, old boiler insulation, they'll come out, and if it's not that obvious, sure, you can grab a sample and have it submitted for very low cost to determine if it has asbestos in it. And then at the same time they're there, because there's free estimates, they'll be able to kind of give you an idea of what it would cost.
And then if they find it, what happens at that point?
Yeah, so if it's there, usually it's a matter of there's a property sale, right? So the one party wants it removed or not, or it's something with heating. The boiler failed and now it needs to be replaced, but obviously someone has to deal with the asbestos abatement first.
Yeah.
Then typically it's a removal and replacement, right? Occasionally, although it's not always cost effective, sometimes loose insulation can be wrapped, you know, and made intact and made safe. But, you know, there's not really that big of a difference than remove and replace.
So I would love to have you come back on the show, Mark. You're like just a wonder of knowledge with all this. So we definitely want to talk about lead paint and some of the other things that that Abide does. So let's schedule you to come back in.
Yeah, absolutely.
But thank you so much for being here today. It's just, you know, it's fantastic, and it's great to see you. So cheers.
Yeah,
on
I
that.
appreciate you having me.
Appreciate it. So everybody, you have a great day, and we'll see everybody soon. Cheers.